Hello everyone, welcome to MRC Psych Paper A, Sociocultural Psychiatry MCQs Part 1. This is part of the video crash class from SPMM. MCQ 1, exaggerated startle response is one of the important features of which culture-bound syndrome? A. Koro, B. Letta, C. Dutch syndrome, D. Amok, E. Windigo. Culture-borne syndromes are encapsulated using the term cultural concepts of distress in DSM-5. And there are many culture-borne syndromes, but the important ones for your exam are covered in this series of video lectures. We will talk about Koro, which is a genital shrinkage syndrome, Dutch syndrome, which is anxiety somatization syndrome based on the fear of loss of vitality from semen, Lata, which is a dissociative reaction, Amok, violent reaction, Windigo is the fear of becoming a cannibal. So culture-borne syndromes will be repeatedly tested in your MRC Psych exam. For this question, we will talk about, let's discuss these startle matching syndromes. We have several syndromes which are culture-borne syndromes, but they reflect a state of hyper startling, increased startling. And the best example of this is a syndrome called Lata. Lata is seen in Indonesia and Malaysia. It's a hyper-startling syndrome evoked by loud noises or being poked forcefully in the side. It's generally seen in women, and the features include forced obedience, echolalia, echopraxia, and coprolalia. Similar syndromes also exist in other parts of the world. There is a syndrome called jumping Frenchman of Maine. It's a culture-borne syndrome with hyper-startling, seen in the state of Maine. It's possibly related to Tourette syndrome. In fact, it was initially described by Tourette, the physician who noticed the tick syndrome as well. Media sheet is the name usually given to a version of Lata that is seen in Siberia. The Russian word media sheet means to fool or to play the fool. So for this question, exaggerated startle response, among the things that are given in the list, Lata is the right answer. In infants born prematurely, after which week of pregnancy are we legally able to resuscitate an infant irrespective of parental wishes? A, 16 weeks, B, 20 weeks, C, 21 weeks, D, 22 weeks, E, 24 weeks. The ethics of neonatal resuscitation gets tested in your MRC Psych exam. In the UK, women have access to termination of pregnancy for maternal reasons until 24 weeks of completed gestation. Beyond 25 weeks, we need to treat according to the child's perceived best interest, even if this is not in accordance with the wishes of the parents. Now, there is no legislation imposing a specific age limit in the UK for resuscitating premature babies, but generally it is 24 weeks that is taken as a cutoff of defining what will become a child's wish versus what is the parental wish. So in infants born prematurely, after which week are we going to treat the child irrespective of parental wishes? It's 24 weeks. Question 3, what is the number of women that have been reported being amputated in the genital area? 100,000, 1 million, 10,000, 10 million, 100 millions. This is a vague question in some sense because it doesn't say whether it is a UK statistics they want or is it a worldwide statistics in terms of genital mutilation. But based on WHO figures, which was last updated in 2014, 100 million women across the world have been mutilated, mutilated, not mutated. So genital mutilation in 100 million women across the world, according to WHO. So we believe this is what is tested in the MRC Psych exams. In the UK, it's estimated that 23,000 girls, women, are cut in the genitalia in the UK every year. Higher risk of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, somatization, phobia, low self-esteem, all of this is found after female genital mutilation. Patients may also develop body image disturbances. Victims may also develop body image disturbances after the genital mutilation. It's a sexual violence, and the map here shows the areas of the world where it is highly prevalent. The dark green areas have more than half of the women genitally mutilated. So it's largely an African and Middle Eastern phenomena, but it is prevalent in other countries as well, many other countries as well. This data is from Health Equity paper in 2019. So the answer for this question, please choose 100 millions. MCQ4, which of the following pertains to human research ethics? Nuremberg Code, NICE Guidelines, Newcastle Declaration, Birmingham Code, none of the above. So Nuremberg Code refers to a code of ethics following Nuremberg trials in 1974, the post-World War II trials. According to Nuremberg Code, human experimentation can be carried out only if voluntary consent is given and if the research is intended for a common good of the society. Avoidance of unnecessary pain and suffering should be guaranteed for the subjects. The subject should have liberty to withdraw at any point. And only qualified researchers should be undertaking research. And the scientist must terminate a study if more harm is being caused than expected to the subjects. These are the pointers codified under Nuremberg Code. This became one of the early formal codes of how medical research should be conducted. And most of these came from the untoward incidents, the wrong practices carried out by the Nazi medico-military program. So the answer for MCQ4 is Nuremberg Code. MCQ5. Which of the following describes an extreme anxiety symptom where a person thinks that his penis is shrinking into his abdomen and he may die as a result? Lata, Koro, Amok, Fag, that syndrome. So this is called Koro. The word Koro stands for turtle head. So people start becoming anxious that their genitalia is going to shrink, just like how a turtle's head withdraws inside the shell. So this is a culture-borne syndrome seen in Malaysia, India, and many parts of Southeast Asia, including China. In China, there is an additional twist to the belief. Patients often have guilt with regard to inappropriate sexual acts that they performed, and they also worry about yin-yang balance being disturbed. And interestingly, Koro can occur in epidemics. So this is just a paper showing that a fifth Koro epidemic occurred in India around 2010. So the patient typically believes all of a sudden they come with intense anxiety and typically believes that their penis is going to recede into their body and possibly cause death. It can also occur in women, interestingly, but the genitalia, instead of being restricted to vulva, they can also have anxiety around the nipples retracting. And it can occur like I said, it can occur as epidemics, and in ICD-11, this comes under a bodily distress disorder. So question 5, the answer is Koro. Question 6, an Inuit woman suffers from sudden attacks of shouting, becoming frightened, and impulsive running away. She appears dissociated during the attacks and has total amnesia for the episodes. Probable diagnosis is Lata, brain fag, piblocto, windigo, DAT. So this is called piblocto, also called Arctic hysteria. This is reported in Inuit women and also other native First Nation and Native Indian people. Dissociative episode, it is classically a dissociative episode with excitement. It's often followed by seizures and coma. It could last up to 12 hours. The patient may be withdrawn before the attack, and they generally have amnesia for the episode. They often tear off their clothing, they shout obscenities, they may end up eating feces and filth, they jump into ice cold water naked, and they may even die accidentally. In some cases, vitamin A toxicity has been suspected, coming largely from excessive consumption of fish in these cultures, and vitamin D deficiency are also reported. But again, very little research has been done in these conditions. Some even question the existence of piblocto as a culture-bound syndrome. But the answer for question 6, please choose C, piblocto. Question 7. A West African student presents with a lethargy, insomnia, palpitation, and anxiety. Choose one culture-bound syndrome. LATA, VAG, Piblocto, Windigo, DUT. So this is called brain fag. This is seen in West African students, and it is considered to be a depressive equivalent. Students typically present with difficulties in concentrating, remembering, and thinking. In fact, brain fag has a very interesting history. This was reviewed recently by Ayon Rinde, a very nice review in International Review of Psychiatry. The history starts from 19th century, the middle of 19th century in Britain. The schooling system was undergoing significant changes, and the public started getting concerns about the impact of excessive study or overstudy. And there were reports which appeared at the time about brain fag occurring as a result of excessive cerebral activity. This idea subsequently transmitted across the British colonies, including British West Africa, where it is now a culture-bound syndrome. You can see brain fag as the latest English disease in 19th century. Right at the moment, currently, it is seen as an equivalent of depression, as a syndrome that is an extension, cultural extension of depressive disorder. So question 7, please choose the answer B. Question 8, a patient with a diagnosis of schizophrenia for a long time is being cared for by an assertive outreach team. He is constantly refusing to take antipsychotics. He has capacity to refuse treatment, and the multidisciplinary team decides to respect his choice. The ethical principle employed here is beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, justice, confidentiality. So as you know, these are prima facie principles. Autonomy means respecting a patient's independence of their will, even if they make irrational decisions, even if they refuse treatment. Beneficence, non-maleficence, these are ethical principles involved in weighing the pros and cons of giving a treatment, giving an intervention. Justice, actually distributive justice, is about resource allocation. There's also other ethical principles which we see in detail as we go along. Deontology is duty-based ethics. Teleology is consequence-based ethics. When we apply Mental Health Act, we often make teleological decisions, and we'll discuss that as we go along. So question number 8, please choose C, autonomy. Question 9, a Chinese man is afraid of going out of his house. He believes that the cold wind will destroy his soul. What is the culture-bound syndrome described here? Piblocto, Koro, Palang, Susto, Windigo. So fear of cold is seen in many cultures. In China, this goes by different terms. Wei Han Zheng means frigophobia, which is a general term used for fear of cold. But specifically, Pa Leng is the disease that's often quoted in the literature, and Pa Feng is the condition often quoted in the literature for fear of wind. These are all phobic disorders. The fear is that cold air may lead to an excess of yin, and weakness, physical weakness and illness can occur as a result. This is the fear, culture-bound fear. And patients start ruminating over loss of body heat, and they may compulsively dress themselves with excessive amount of clothes. Heavy clothing will be seen despite being warm, the temperature being warm. They engage in avoidance behavior related to cold, exactly like a phobic disorder. They avoid situations which will expose them to cold. So here the answer is Pa Leng. Question 10, the life event with highest rating in Holmes-Rahe scale is divorce, jail term, marriage, job loss, childbirth. So Holmes-Rahe scale is a scale to measure life events, the impact of life events. It's a measure of adversity. There are many ways in which we can measure the effect of a stressful life event. You can use semi-structured interviews, or you can use life event scales. Semi-structured interviews include scales such as procedures such as the Life Events and Difficulties Scale, LEDS, by Brown and Harris. Interview for Recent Life Event Scale by Pakel. But life event scales which are based on specific ratings rather than a semi-structured interview, these are scales such as Holmes-Rahe's Social Readjustment Rating Scale, Adverse Childhood Event Scale, Hassles and Uplift Scale, etc. In your exam, they generally ask you about Holmes-Rahe scale, social readjustment scale. So what is this? So Holmes-Rahe scale gives a rating for stressful life event, but the rating is not based on the context in which the life event occurs. It's only based on what general public will regard as stress. And that could differ. So for some people being married may be very stressful. For others, it may not be, depending on the context. So Holmes-Rahe scale doesn't take context into account. It gives a fixed value for each life event. And it gives highest stress marks for death of a spouse, followed by divorce. So it's very influenced by the North American thinking of stressful life events. So you'll see how the ranking is provided here. Highest amount of points for death of a spouse followed by divorce. In this list, we don't have death of a spouse, so please choose A, divorce. Question 11. Which of the following studies are associated with deliberate infection in people with learning disabilities? Nuremberg study, Willowbrook School study, Tuskegee study, Belmont study, Jewish chronic disease hospital study. So Willowbrook School study is an important historical anecdotal study, which we need to know in context of ethics in psychiatry, ethics in general in medicine, but ethics in psychiatry in particular. This is a study where children were given, children who attended Willowbrook State School were given hepatitis, were infected deliberately with the hepatitis virus to study the antibody response. These children had learning disabilities as well. So this is quite unethical. In the current context, this cannot be done simply, but this was practiced at those days. This is Willowbrook State School study. This is infecting children with hepatitis. That is the story behind that. There are other studies which are similarly unethical, but they provide important lessons, historical lessons for us. That includes the Tuskegee study, Tuskegee syphilis study, where patients were observed in a cohort fashion, in a longitudinal prospective fashion. But in the middle of the cohort observation period, a treatment was introduced for syphilis. So these were syphilitic patients. They were observed for a long period of time. In the middle of the observation, penicillin became available for treatment. But the treatment was denied for these patients simply because the researchers were interested in finding out answers for the research questions. What happens to tertiary syphilis? How secondary syphilis becomes tertiary syphilis? So the patients were actually denied a treatment that could have saved them. So this is Tuskegee syphilis study, again, completely unethical, cannot be done these days. Then you have Jewish chronic disease hospital study, where cancer cells were deliberately injected in patients, mostly children, to study the effect, immunity effects. So these are all bad apples, just examples for us to know what shouldn't be done. So question number 11, the answer is B, Willowbrook School study.